going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily. Now, in previous years, LG's V series was a decent upgrade over the G series, but this time around, I think you'll find that both of these devices are surprisingly similar. We'll go ahead and compare them side by side here. I'll talk about what's different, what's the same, and maybe this will help you decide which of these LG devices works best for you. Hardware-wise, the look and feel of both devices is pretty similar. They both have an all-glass design with a very shiny finish and similar design cues from top to bottom, but the displays up front here are where you'll find the first pretty big difference between the phones. The G7 rocks a 6.1-inch IPS LCD display at 3120 by 1440 resolution, while the V30 packs a 6-inch POLED screen with a 2880 by 1440 resolution. Visually, both displays of course look great, but you sort of have to decide if you want to go with an IPS panel or OLED. And if you're familiar with the two types of displays, you're probably pretty good at telling them apart. The other deciding factor in regards to the displays is that notch. The G7 has it obviously, and the V35 does not. So if that's something that's going to bother you, the V35 is the way to go. You can hide the G7's notch. There are some options in settings that allow you to do that, but I know a lot of people are just totally against the whole notch thing in general. Both phones are pretty similar in their size and shape, but you'll notice that the G7 is just a little bit taller by about 1.5 millimeters, while the V35 is a little wider by about 3.5 millimeters. It's not much, but overall the V35 has that more classic design, while the G7 is a bit more tall and skinny like we're seeing with a lot of smartphones nowadays. Around back, both devices have a rear fingerprint sensor and the dual camera setup, and although it's vertical on the G7 and horizontal on the V35, the camera hardware here is nearly identical. There's not going to be much of a difference with picture and video capability between the two phones. And just a note, both devices do still pack that wide angle lens that LG is famous for. And since both devices also have that ThinQ branding, you're getting the same AI cam as well. Both phones have sort of a different button setup, which is kind of interesting. The fingerprint sensor on the V35 doubles as the power button, while the G7's is just the sensor with no button. And because of that, you've got some differences on the sides of the phones as well. The G7 has a dedicated Google Assistant button on the left side, while the V35 does not, and the G7 has its power button on the right side, with nothing on the V35. The V35 also has its headphone jack up top, while the G7's is placed on the bottom. As far as the internal specs go, you're getting nearly identical internals across the device. The G7 packs the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor, Adreno 630 GPU, expandable storage via micro SD card, and either 4GB of RAM with 64GB of built-in storage, or 6 gigs with 128. The V35 also comes with the Snapdragon 845 processor, Adreno 630 expandable storage, but 6GB of RAM is standard on this device, with either 64 or 128GB of onboard storage, depending on if you go for the V35 Plus model. They both ship with Android 8.0 Oreo. G7 is rumored to get Android P fairly quickly, but obviously both devices have that same LG skin that I know is kind of polarizing. As far as the overall experience though, if you can get the G7 with the 6GB of RAM, obviously both devices would be identical in speed and capabilities. So overall, there isn't one device that's noticeably faster or more powerful than the other. The V35, however, does have a slightly larger battery, 3300 mAh versus 3000 on the G7. It's not a huge difference, but it's something that might be noticeable during day-to-day use for some people. A couple other things that sets these phones apart: the G7 has LG's special boombox speaker that's loud and full of bass, where the phone acts as a resonance chamber, while the V35 just gets the standard single downward firing speaker. So there you go, those are pretty much all of the major similarities and differences between LG's latest flagship phone.